Welcome to the Classic Motor Show podcast here in Birmingham, and I am delighted to be joined by Sir Ian Callum. Now, Sir Ian, can I call you Ian?
Yes, the Sir bit has been made up by a few people, actually, but I'll take it. It's fine. Just call me Ian, please.
Lord Ian.
Yeah, Lord will do.
It moves on.
Lord is fine.
Ian, you have had a fantastic career, still going in design. For those of you who don't know, those of us who don't know much about your career to start with, but could you give us the headlines?
Yeah, I mean, I took a great interest in cars, as many do, at the age of 3 or 4 years old. And I was always drawing stuff. I was always drawing things around the house, mechanical things, and like foot mixers and radios and stuff like that. And I saw a Porsche 356 one day, and I thought, I want to be part of that world. Now, this is preschool. This is long time ago, back in the 50s. So the Porsche was new. So you can imagine how long ago that was. And I decided I would be a car designer before I went to school. And that was it. Stuck.
It's stuck at that. But I imagine, most of us have at some point in our lives got a piece of paper and a pencil and tried to draw a car. And it's not gone particularly well for the majority of us. What were your rudimentary drawings like as a 4 or 5 year old?
They weren't bad, actually. They weren't bad. I just drew and drew and drew. It's all I did. I wasn't interested in football. I became a pseudo rock star later, but as you do, with long hair and everything. But no, it's just cars. That was it. And I drew and drew. And, you know, it's like 10,000 hours of sketching. It became something I could do very naturally. So by the time I got to school, at the age of 5, I told my teacher I was going to be a car designer. And she said, yes, Ian, patted me in the head and sent me back to my desk. And I thought, I'll prove her wrong. So, but yeah, I enjoyed drawing. And that's a communication thing. And I've learned so much since then about how you communicate through drawing. It's so important. I
mean, your career has been incredible, starting off really with Ford, then working on the Aston Martin, the DB7, the Vanquish as well. A fair bit of time at Jag. We'll touch upon all of these, but I read on a well-known internet source, so it may or may not be true, that you as a teenager sent off a drawing to Jaguar and got a response. Talk us through that.
Yeah, I was 14. I was starting to struggle into how I was going to get into the business. And of course, I lived in a little provincial town in Scotland, and then, people didn't know how to be car designers. And so I wrote to Jaguar, and I wrote to William Haynes, who was the vice president of engineering, number 2 in the business. And he wrote back to me, and he told me I had to go off and do various things. And I wrote back to him and says, no, you don't understand. I want to design the cars, which, of course, in those days was William Lyon's job, So he wrote back to me again. He said, well, you need to go and do engineering and commercial art together. Basically, that turned into industrial design. But, of course, back in 1967, it wasn't really something people knew much about. And so I headed in that direction, doing industrial design.
But it sounds like you had a clear desire then from this 3 or 4, 5-year-old boy. Was there a particular, you mentioned the Porsche, but was there anything else really that was influencing your design? When I look at the Aston, look at the Jag, there are similarities between those in design. But what about when you were younger? Porsche to Aston is very different.
This is a bit funny, actually. There's 2 cars that influenced me. Jaguar, of course, because it was the most exotic car around town, but it was attainable. It was something you would see. You wouldn't see Ferraris, or there was one guy with an Aston. But Jaguar was the aspiration for a lot of people, aspiration for me, and I loved them. And I think that came about because I saw an E-Type in 1961 with my grandfather in Edinburgh. And he took me to the showroom and he showed me this brand new car called the E-Type, and I fell in love with it. So I think that was a hook for me for Jaguar. But the other car I used to draw lots of would-be cars were Vauxhalls. I know, Jaguars and Vauxhalls.
There's a Venn diagram, a very random Venn diagram going on.
Well, my father drove Vauxhalls, and I always saw them. I was very influenced by what was happening in GM in the US at the time. And the GM 60s period was actually stunningly good. It really was, especially in the US. And I recognized that, and I want to be part of that GM circle of design. So Vauxhall was the closest thing I would get to it. And of course, when Wayne Cherry took over Vauxhall design in the early 70s, he did some remarkable stuff for Vauxhalls, And People don't always recognize it, but he did some incredible design work, and that influenced me as well. And by the time I got to the mid-70s, I kind of lost faith in Jaguar because it was just repeating the same old stuff again. So my focus was to go to Vauxhall, and I finished my industrial design course. I applied for a job, didn't get it, and then this company called Ford Motor Company offered my sponsorship to the Royal College. So I ended up, by default, at Ford. Didn't want to, but I did.
But you did, yeah.
It's a good job, actually, when you think about it.
I mean, they were churning out a lot of cars at the time as well, and I suppose that they were everyone knew of the brand. It was a massive brand, always has been. But what about before you even got your first job at Ford? Let's just roll back a little bit, because I did also read that you went to Polytechnic, not far from where we are in Birmingham, in Coventry. But then you said to me just before we started, I wasn't there for very long.
No. I went there in this sort of moment of desperation to find... They started an automotive course in Lancaster Polytechnic, as it was then. And as an 18-year-old, just 18, I went down to Coventry, from the sticks, and I didn't like it.
You were sent to Coventry?
I was sent to Coventry, yeah. And I remember driving in. Of course, my impression of a city at that age was a place called Edinburgh. All cities are like Edinburgh. No, they weren't. So I was driving through Coventry and I thought, it's not what I expect a city to be like. And so the cathedral was nice, of course, but that was about it, really. So I lasted there a year. And then I kind of got a little bit lost in life. And I went off to the Highlands to find myself in Aberdeen. So I went from one end of the country to the other, very deliberately.
And you did find yourself there?
I did, yeah. Then I went and did industrial design at Glasgow after that.
So how did you land the job at Ford? Was it the standard application process, or was there a sort of a backdoor, you sending random letters off to random people?
As I did, often. Random letters. I used to send letters to all the dealerships. And then we got a Rolls Royce turn up at our house one day. Mr. Callum, here's the car for a test drive, because I'd written to the Glasgow dealership. Calendars, I think they were called. And they sent down a Rolls Royce for my dad to drive. But it was me that wrote the letter.
But you were popular for a short week, I imagine?
It was amusing. Anyway, no, I applied for a job at Ford. And they looked at my portfolio and they said, "You are right for the Royal College. You're not ready for the company." So on that interview, looking for a job as a sort of junior designer, and this was in Dunton in Essex, I was offered a place at the Royal College with sponsorship. So I took it up. But at the same time, I was trying to get a job at Vauxhall. And they offered me a place at the Arts Centre in California, but with no money. So, when needs must, I took the course at the Royal College with Ford. And that was the start of a career that if you'd told me about then what had happened, I would have hardly believed it, really.
What were you working on in those early days?
It was so amusing. I spent 10 years designing steering wheels.
Did you?
So if you see an 80s Ford steering wheel, and there are plenty of them here today, I probably designed it. Yeah, it got a bit frustrating. I did other things. I was very fortunate. I got involved in the competition department as well.
Talk me through the design, the start of a steering wheel design. I've got an impression in my mind of what you'd start with.
Was round.
Yeah, exactly. There you go.
Not so much anymore. Everybody's copying the old Allegro one now, I see, which they laughed at the time. No, you take all the parameters of clearances and everything. It's very much a kind of a factual thing to do, but then you add form and stuff to it. And you make clay models, as we did then, of steering wheels. So, and then I worked on an airbag steering wheel for the Scorpio Merkur, which is the one that went into the US. So I probably designed the first airbag steering wheel in Europe. Actually.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's very cool.
I think so.
Very cool. I think you should fly the flag for that one a little bit more. What about when you left Ford then, and the next stage? What was the catalyst for you moving on to go and start working with Aston Martin?
Well, what happened was, I think it was frustration, really. I'd worked around the world with Ford. I'd been in Australia, Germany, and I even worked in Italy for a while with my brother, funnily enough, and Japan. And every time I came back to Dunton, I was sort of found myself designing steering wheels again. So I think out of frustration, I applied for a job at TWR in Oxford and joined Tom Walkinshaw Racing as creating a new design studio, because he saw the power of design as a shop window for creating product and creating ideas. And so I went to TWR, and the first car I worked on was DB7, which started off being a Jaguar. And I think the world kind of knows this, but we only got about a quarter way through it, and Jaguar lost interest. And Tom sold the whole notion of what we'd be doing to Aston Martin. So, through the next year or so, it became DB7.
When you're going around that sort of mark and you're working with Aston Martin, they've got a design culture running through. What was it like back then around that before the DB7 coming through? What was going on with their influences and where they were looking to go?
Very little. I mean,
Really?
the company was on its knees.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, but back in 1991, nobody knew what Aston Martin was. We knew what it had been, especially with the Bond influence. But it was building one Virage or whatever it was called, Vantage, a year, one a week, 50 cars a year. So it was on its knees. Ford had a share of it, didn't know what to do with it. So we created a volume car. So there wasn't a lot of culture to be had. It was the only culture really I had to be aware of was its history that I kind of instinctively knew about. And we just created a car around elegance, really. It's about elegance.
And then there's no surprise then that the car that was originally intended to be a Jaguar had the same elegance that Aston Martin were looking for.
Yeah, we had
intrinsically.
Yeah, intrinsically, I suppose it did, and it we hadn't shaped it at this time. We just set up the package. It's a very long and protracted process of designing a car, as you can imagine. So we'd set up the package of the car. We'd modify the XJS platform, and at that point, it became an Aston. So we started to shape it as an Aston, and that's how it came about. But yeah, I think my inner self in terms of design comes from that type and era of car. I've got a sense of simplicity and elegance in the way I want to do things, and that fitted the brand well.
It's interesting how certain cars, an E-Type Jag, for example, is of a period. We know when that car arrived, it's an E-Type. We know that it still has that presence. It's an E-Type, yada, yada, yada. It's still there. But when you look at an Aston, a DB7, DB9s, they still look relatively brand new. They still look like new shaped cars. The evolution, Aston have become a bit more aggressive maybe in their design, but they still have that same flow that even goes back to the early 90s.
Yeah, they do, and it's about a sense of speed, and most of these cars are front engine, rear cabin, so that naturally gives it a kind of proportion you would expect of a sports car, and that sense of speed, the sense of movement. And I think when we're designing something, certainly I do, I try and create that sense of movement in the shape of the car. But it's a package of the car that sets it up. If you put an engine, a big engine in the front, they do tend to be big, set them back, it sets up the proportion of the car for you. They're very similar in that respect.
We hear this idea of creating a sense of speed when the car's static. When it stands still, it looks like it's still moving through the air. For those of us mortals that don't understand how you even go about doing that, is there a format, a theory that says, well, it follows these proportions, these ratios, something like that, so all of us can now start going home, getting our pens and paper out, and then we'll create the next big thing?
Yeah, it's about creating simple lines that have movement in them. So if you look at, say, the front wing of an E-Type or DB7 or even, a DB9, it's got a sense of simplicity and line to it. So if you're looking at it from afar, your eye starts at the beginning and it goes towards the rear normally. And you sense that line is going somewhere. It's got movement to it. Now, the moment you start, and that's why SUVs are difficult, because they tend to be vertical rather than horizontal. But if you got a sense of that line looking as if it had been drawn by a pencil on paper with a sense of movement in it, you have to recapture that in the car. And that's what I try and do. And don't clutter it up with other lines and other elements, because the moment you do that, it loses its value. A line has a certain value relative to one or two, but if you put a line against 4 or 5 other elements, it will lose its value. It's like words,
So what about then if you're coming up to this, you clearly, I mean, you've studied cars for a very, very long time when it comes to design. Do you look back at a particular decade or a particular era, even today in 2025, when you're getting your pencil out on a bit of paper? Is there a particular car, a particular brand, marque that you look at?
Not really. I think I just have a fairly strong philosophy myself. I like things to be simple and strong and matter of fact. And so when you look at it, there's no ambiguity. And I think a lot of modern cars now look rather ambiguous, to say the least, because they've got so many elements thrown into one space. And a car is of a certain size and volume that you can only take in so much at a time. And, so I'm always craving to do something which is simple. But there are fashions. And as much as I look back on some of the older cars, and they were simpler to build because the rules were simpler then as well. I mean, you couldn't build an E-Type now legally. There'd be so many laws against them. So it's about understanding all the rules, but it's also about connecting with the latest fashions, the latest ideas that you see. And you get inspired by them. And, that sense of, at the moment, I call it cubism, is the latest style you see. Very square, blocked-in cars. Most of these Chinese cars, you see, are very much of that mode. I don't endorse it because I think they're just a bit too static, but I understand what they're trying to do. And I try and bake some of that notion of geometry into what I do to give it a modernity, which will pass and it'll move to something else.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you're talking about regulations in many ways, things you can't do. I imagine from a designer point of view, is that something that frustrates you? I was looking at the Alpha, the Montreal, that's here at the show. That was a concept car in 1967 that then people wanted it to be a road car, a production car, so they turned it into a production car. What about yourself? If you're coming up with a car, a concept, that concept, is it one that will never exist, or is the concept one that's always got a possibility of existing?
I always design concepts as something that has a potential to exist. Otherwise, it's just a painting on the wall then, isn't it? A lot of concepts during the 60s, 70s, the Italians did quite a lot. Did end up just one-offs, but they did show a hint of where the car business was going and where the influence was. But when I'm designing something, I like to think it could meet reality, even if it's a one-off, but it's legal at least, and it's drivable. It would frustrate me just to do a car aesthetically for the sake of it. And I've done it before. Yeah. I mean, you do it naturally when you're sketching. But a lesson learned, I remember we did we designed the Jaguar XF, and we created the concept car about 6 months before the car came out, and we exaggerated it quite a lot. And then we said this is a new notion of Jaguar. And when we brought the XF out, which should have been a revelation, was disappointing because we'd overpromised.
Oh, I see.
A bit like politicians, really, overpromising all the time.
No comment on that one.
No, but you can't overpromise. You've got to temper things with reality, so that for instance, the concept car we did looked fantastic. You couldn't get into the back of it. There was no room. So in reality,
so there's a balance then.
There's a balance.
There's a balance between this bonkers crazy notion of what you could do and what will actually be on the road, because you don't want to overpromise and undersell.
Exactly. Otherwise, you just disappoint people.
Yeah.
The Porsche Boxster is another story, very similar. The Porsche Boxster concept was very, very, short overhangs. It was a fantastic looking car. People were really looking forward to it. And when the real one came out, it was not as good. And, Porsche took quite a lot of flack for that. So don't overpromise on concepts.
We've mentioned Ford, we've mentioned Aston Martin, Jag with the XF, the XJ, the F-Type models as well. I'm going to ask you a question that you've probably been asked a million times, if all the questions I've asked you so far don't fall into that category. But of all the cars you've designed, much like children, which one is your favourite? Yeah, if all the others had to be removed from history, but only one could be kept.
That is dramatic.
It's got to be. It's a podcast. We've got to sell it.
Well, there are two up there.
Oh, two. Okay, give the two.
So, because they're very different, and I would like them both to remain for that reason. The F-Type really was a successor to the E-Type. It's the closest we could get to something which was an indulgent two-seater. And we couldn't have made that car any tighter or any smaller than we did, given the mechanics underneath it. But the F-Type's got to be up there as a form of indulgent beauty. And that's what it was, you know. That's what sports cars are. They are an indulgence of form and function over most things, you know. And function being it only has to carry 2 people and make them laugh, really.
When you see an F-Type out on the road, it's relatively uncommon. When you see an F-Type, there's a fair number of them, but they don't see them all the time. They do have a presence to them. You do get, I think most people see an F-Type and like it. I don't think many people don't, if you know what I mean. There's something about an F-Type that's a bit different to a run-of-the-mill.
Yeah, I mean, it's got a great stance. It's a wide car. It's 1.93 meters. It has, you know, the wheels as close to the edges as we can get them. But it's got a lovely silhouette, especially the coupe. Funnily enough, I actually passed one today coming in, and I was looking down. I drive a van normally, believe it or not. And I was looking down in this F-Type, drove up beside me, and I was just like, I thought, that wasn't bad. That's a nice car. And I took some pride when just a little personal note to myself. Yeah, he done good there.
Lovely.
Done good there. But the other car that has been mentioned, and a lot of people here probably don't totally approve, is the I-Pace, the first electric Jaguar, which was proportionally a very challenging car for people, but it's the right thing to do for an electric car. And I see them today, and it's still got a sense of movement and drama about them that other SUV electric cars do not have. And I'm frustrated people didn't pick up on it and use it as a springboard for design, because it deserved better. It really did. You
did say a little bit earlier on about designing an SUV being tricky because it's more vertical than it is horizontal, so you've got to come up with a completely different style or approach, or can you use regular approaches?
No, it's just a bit taller. So when we did the F-Pace, the first SUV I worked on, we made sure all the lines were very sympathetic to something that flows, including the roof profile.
Yeah.
It shoots off towards the back. It's got drama in the back. So it's got a horizontal drama there that a lot of SUVs don't necessarily have. And a lot of SUVs play in the vertical. You know, they use it to their advantage. They play in the fact it sits high and it's stately. Whereas the F-Pace and the I-Pace have a sense of movement about them, albeit a little bit higher up in space, perhaps.
What about your thoughts then
but it's difficult.
Yeah.
You know, it's difficult to get that balance.
I mean, I wouldn't even know where to begin. Most of us wouldn't. But what about the current era? We are talking current era with the F-Pace, I suppose. It's still relatively new-ish car.
Well, I don't think they make them anymore.
But that era,
sadly.
That style.
Yeah.
What about the current design of cars? If we look in 2025, things that are rolling, standard regular cars rolling off production, have we lost our way a little bit? Have we got back into the realms of dull, of this is what we're going to do, this is a car now?
I've got to be careful what I say here, because I'm going to be accused of just being old. But I'll take it. I think a lot of cars now are very similar because people are copying each other more. There are more cars now than ever before. You think the proliferation of Chinese cars coming in and they all look fairly similar. They're not. None of them are really very elegant cars. They are designed very consciously to almost a recipe that somebody's done, and this sort of repeats itself. There's a particular front end style we see everywhere now where the lower half is kind of a big blank grille and the upper half has got the lamp running across the width of it. My goodness, if I see another one of those, I think I'll scream. But, you know, if you look back a few years ago, there's this swage line, which is a feature line in the car that started at the back and went down towards the front wheel arch, and a negative section under it. Every car had that. So I think there's an element of people being influenced by other cars. The SUV market being the standard now is not giving us much hope in terms of something that looks dramatic. They're very matter of fact. They're designed to take 5 adults and their luggage, and people's choices are usually down to price and cost and economy. Yeah. So there's a lot of dullness going on there because of the very nature of an SUV. It's a dull vehicle by its norm. So, you know, saloon cars, I think they're almost gone. I don't know if they're going to see many more of those. But, it's not a great time, I don't think, personally. And there is a tendency for cars to look a bit baroque, a bit overly fussy, a bit complicated to look at. And if a designer has to explain a design to the observer, he or she has failed.
So simplicity is key when we're watching.
Strong simplicity.
Strong simplicity.
Yeah.
What about your
As
favorite?
opposed to simplistic.
Simplistic, yes, very different things. What about then your favorite decade, looking back now? Not the cars that you've designed then necessarily, but maybe that you've taken influence on. Or, I wonder if it goes back to your 4 or 5 year old you when you were looking at those cars.
Yeah, I mean, I look at the GM cars of the 60s, and every one of them was stunning, and there was an understanding, there was a knowing about them that even that myself at 5 or 6 or 10 actually understood. The lines were very considered. The Ford at the same time weren't considered. It's about editing. So that era really is a big favorite of mine. A car I would like to have is a Buick Riviera 65. I mean, but it's massive. It wouldn't fit the roads here. But it's a beautiful car. I mean, people say, oh, it's just a big American car. No, it's a very beautiful car. There was an era of simplicity then. But every era has its good cars. It's had the Giugiaro times with these origami, as they call it, design. I mean, that was really a huge influence for me. And that was a beautiful time for the Italians as well. And then Pininfarina in the 60s and 70s was great. But it's become very international now as well. You can't really determine whether the car is American or French or German or British so much as you used to be able to. Which is a bit of a shame. And I think the French are trying to get that character back, actually. Yeah. They are trying hard to do that.
That might be because some of those French marques used German designers as well at some stage too. I suppose they've worked their way through. Well, they've borrowed from different...
Ironically, a lot of the most famous German designers from Mercedes, BMW, were in fact French or Italian, because they had the spark in those days, right, Right. Yeah, but I mean, the car industry is very international. You go to Porsche, you'll find Brits in there, French, German, whatever.
Yeah.
And even in Jaguar, we had a fairly international staff.
While we're now talking about design, we'll finish up with some advice for for anybody who wants to nick your job, anybody who wants to come on in and become a designer, specifically a car designer. They're young, old, in between, whatever. What advice could you give to them? I'm sure writing a letter off to the number 2 at a company isn't quite as possible as it was back then, but... Is there a...
Well, funnily enough, I got letters all the time at Jaguar, and I did try and reply to most of them with some advice. The problem now is much more competitive, because, kids now know what car design is, and they see it everywhere, and, it's like being a rock star. That's what you want to do, because it seems glamorous and it sounds glamorous. In actual fact, it's a very hard-working job. But what I advise is learn to draw, because that's your communication. Now, you might want to learn to draw on an iPad, on a computer screen or whatever, but learn to be able to turn your thoughts into something that communicates to other people, and do it with ease. It's like learning a language. Do it with ease. Otherwise, there's no point writing down a paragraph of what you think, because people will neither understand what's in your head or indeed even bother reading it. So you've got to be able to draw. It's very important. And also just look around at what's happening in the history of design, not just cars. Look at furniture design, architecture, and really work through why something is good. And it's usually down to determined simplicity and an understanding of proportions.
And talking about furniture, that brings us very nicely to close this off with the next venture for you. So you left your role at Jag now. Mm. You're now going alone. What's this chapter that you're on now?
So I left on a Friday and started my new job on Monday, so there wasn't much of retirement really. And we started a company called Callum, which I share with 2 other fellow directors. One's an engineer and one's more of a marketing guy. And basically he's the MD. He looks after everything. And I set out with this business to design nice things. It's indulgent. I've done the OEM, cost-effective cars all my life. And so I wanted to go and just design cars for individuals. Bit of craft in there. I've designed some furniture as well, which I really enjoyed. I think every designer has to design a chair at some point. They really do.
What does your chair look like? Can you describe it?
Yeah, it's like a Charles Eames chair, but it's modernized. And it uses ply as a base, but it's got carbon structure in it, so there's a bit of car influence in there.
Nice.
And it's on our website, Callum Designs, if you want to have a look.
Good plug.
Good plug. And, we're selling them we're building a couple of months. We need to find a way of manufacturing in a more efficient way, because we just build them by hand, basically.
Have you enjoyed your career?
Oh, what a time.
Yeah.
What a blast.
Yeah.
Yeah, still enjoying it.
Good.
Yeah, no, I feel very, very blessed that I set out to do something, I've done it, and I continue to love it. And, you know, creativity is the most special thing in the world. And if people of influence could understand that, and I mean right up to political level, if you want to save a business or a country, get creative, and that's what will get you the results.
We shall end that right there. Sir Ian Callum, thank you
Thank you
very much indeed. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.